Hello and welcome to the Olfactive Melbourne podcast. I'm your host, Trent Stokes.
And I'm Robin Stokes. We are a husband and wife team passionate about perfume. We are on an olfactory journey to better understand and explore the art of perfumery, and we're very excited to have you all along on that journey with us. Today we're coming to you from Melbourne, Australia, and we'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land that we're recording on today. They are the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation. We pay our respects to their elders, past and present, and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people listening today.
And it is wonderful to be back for another episode live here from the Bulldog Studios in Windsor. So for those who are new to the podcast, this podcast is all about interviewing some absolutely extraordinary brands and the people behind those brands. From the founders to the perfumers and onto the creatives who take us on a journey through a fragrance that best represents their brand. Now, the show is wrapped around a masterclass, and we invite our guests to take us through each stage of the perfume that they've selected, from the opening notes to the heart notes and through to the base notes. We explore each one of the notes and accords, and we drill into those that are interesting or maybe a little bit difficult to identify to help us better understand both the perfume that our guest has brought on and to help us better understand perfume notes in general. That helps us to connect with perfumery on a slightly deeper level and helps us make better and more informed decisions about the perfumes that we engage with and that we ultimately wear. Now, the show does unfold in real time, so that masterclass means that there's some time in between the opening notes and the heart notes and the base notes. That time is known as the dry down. Now, during the dry down, we're going to deep dive into our guests' perfume journey, get an understanding of their brand, their mission, their vision, their values, as well as explore the broader range that they've brought in with them. So the show is both educational and entertaining. So make sure that you settle in, relax, grab yourself a coffee, and like and subscribe for future episodes.
Today, we're so excited to have with us Sophie Marcoux from Ficifolia Fragrances. Ficifolia is an Australian female-led brand, and it captures emotions and memories through scent. Ficifolia is unique in its approach in that every fragrance is reverse engineered to inspire us to think about different moments in time and places that remind us and celebrate Australian cities. Welcome to the show, Sophie. It's wonderful to have you.
Thanks for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
So, Sophie, just to start off, if you could please give us a quick overview of your brand. So how long have you been around? Where are you based? And where does the inspiration come from the name?
So we are a Melbourne-based brand. We've been around for 2 years, which is crazy. We just celebrated our second birthday in January. So Ficifolia actually comes from the scientific name of the red flowering gum, which is native to Southwest WA, which is where I grew up and where I hold a lot of my first scent memories. And it's actually so funny. The house I live in at present has 2 Ficifolia trees, and I didn't realize until they came into bloom. So that was a really fun surprise over January.
That's super.
Yeah, wonderful coincidence, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Fantastic. Now, Sophie, I believe you have brought a fragrance along with you today. So for those who are actually listening and who aren't actually watching today, which fragrance have you brought on with you? And tell us a little bit about why you selected that particular fragrance to showcase today.
So I brought Bistro Boy, which is one of our new fragrances from our Sydney collection, which launched in November. And Bistro Boy is inspired by long lunching in Paddington. So I was really heavily inspired by a dish of burrata. I feel like it's all the girlies are eating at the moment. And I really just had this vision for a herbaceous fragrance that wasn't sweet and had that kind of savory gourmand element to it. And I also really wanted to play with notes that you wouldn't typically find in a mass-marketed fragrance. And so Bistro Boy came to life.
Fantastic.
Well, I'm really looking forward to trying it. So maybe if we spend a moment just applying it to both our skin and some blotters.
What would be great to understand here is just that name, Bistro Boy. Obviously, you've just hinted here that it's around based on food and people eating burrata. But I guess what inspired you to want to create a food-based fragrance?
Well, I mean, we've been seeing a lot of tomato leaf fragrances enter the market over the last couple years. And I think what I was really missing was something that was truly savory, but not like a candle and still wearable. And that was something I just couldn't find. And so I wanted something that was, because I'm so not a vanilla girl. I just can't get around the sweet gourmands, much to everyone's dismay. So I really wanted a gourmand that was different to what was out. And also I design our fragrances with the philosophy that everything is gender neutral. And I believe all fragrances are genderless. That's a whole nother topic of conversation we could speak about. But I really wanted something that was the perfect unisex fragrance that wasn't just a woody scent. And that's really where Bistro Boy comes in. And it's been really well received so far.
Fantastic. All right. So we're going to lean on you pretty heavily through the course of the show, Sophie, just to guide us through each one of the notes or chords that are exposed at each stage of the opening heart and the base. However, this is an educational show, so I'm going to take an opportunity here to educate our audience on perfumery in general. And we're going to start with the opening notes. So when we think about the traditional construction of a perfume in perfumery, we think about a perfume pyramid where our opening notes sit at the very top of the pyramid. We have our heart notes sitting right in the middle, and we have our base notes at the very bottom of the pyramid. So talking about the opening notes are generally, they generally consist of lighter aroma molecules that are a little bit more volatile. It means that they surface in the fragrance first, but they also dissipate first. They serve as a bit of an introduction to the fragrance. It tells us a little bit about what the fragrance is about. It's a bit of a segue into that heart note. So with all of that said, let's have a little bit of a sniff, and then you can guide us through what actual notes we're smelling here.
Mm-hmm. So starting off, we're really opening with that eucalyptus and mint. I feel like those are the two really strong front runners, and that tomato leaf is really coming through. And it was so funny when we were developing this fragrance. It was so hard to get the inclusion of the mint and eucalyptus right, because they are such strong scents. They're hard and fast. And it was hard to get it to not overpower the fragrance entirely. But you really, truly can smell all those beautiful herbs coming through at the start.
It's definitely herbalicious, isn't it?
It is. And I actually, the mint and the eucalyptus to me is very well blended. You can smell them both, but together they just smell really gorgeous. And as you say, very herby.
They do share quite similar facets. So I did evaluate, when I was evaluating the fragrance, I wasn't sure if I should take one out and leave the other one in. But I think we got a really beautiful balance of the fragrance in the end. So, yeah.
Fantastic. Just before we proceed through some of the notes here, it's probably worth explaining what a gourmand is, because not everybody is super experienced in perfumery. So, Sophie, what is a gourmand?
A gourmand is typically an edible fragrance, or it smells edible. So a lot of your vanillas, your sweet caramels, anything with cocoa. And look, I think that it can vary, because you can get gourmandish notes in a fragrance that you wouldn't classify as a gourmand, but it does sit as its own category and family.
So it's a bit delicious. You do want to eat it, but it's not always necessarily food.
Correct.
Yeah. Fantastic. All right. So we'll dive into some of the notes here. So one that you mentioned before that's quite popular in perfumery at the moment is that sort of tomato leaf. Not everybody's had experience with tomato leaf. And I understand that it can be a little bit difficult to sort of describe these smells at times, but you can try your best to maybe give us an understanding of what that might smell like, maybe with an association with something else that people might encounter in their everyday life, just to help them identify that note in your top notes here.
Well, for me, tomato leaf really smells like a very ripe tomato. You kind of get that sweetness to it, but it's not a sweet scent. But it is very green, and it has that essence of tomato without being ketchup.
That's a good way to describe it. It's, as you're mentioning this and I'm smelling that, that's exactly what I'm getting as well.
Yes, sometimes the word vegetal they might use as well, I think.
Definitely. Well, and it also is like kind of celery adjacent. It's just quite leafy without being a leaf, for lack of a better word.
And then there's the basil as well.
Yes.
So what facet of the basil were you trying to bring out?
Well, for me, it was really the garnish on the burrata. And so I think that's what makes it blend so beautifully with the fragrance, especially in those top notes. It's not quite pesto-y, but it's still bright and green. And it just, these opening notes are just so lively. And that's really what you get with the opening of the fragrance.
Absolutely. I think, I guess my experience with gourmands so far, and maybe it's a bit of a preconceived idea with gourmands, but I sort of associate them with winter.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure why. Maybe it's just I've smelt some pretty heavy They're comforting.
Yeah.
That's not really what I'm getting with this. This is actually quite fresh and quite lively and feels almost summery. Definitely something I could wear right now in Melbourne. I mean, it's not the hottest day in the world, but I could definitely sort of sport this in summer. I guess.
Yeah. Well,
suitable?
I mean, look, it's a really feel-good fragrance. It's very uplifting. It's energizing. And I always, whenever I spray it, I'm just like, oh, just so good, And I think that a lot of people feel that way. And, fragrance is the last thing you put on before you leave the house. And what better way to leave the house? Feeling energized and excited about what you're doing, and it's refreshing. But yes, it's not, it is trans-seasonal, which is important because you don't want to buy a fragrance and waste it on one season.
Yeah, very, very versatile.
Mm-hmm.
So just to round out the conversation around the top notes, how do you think that these uplifting and bright notes set the scene for the rest of the heart notes and base to come?
Well, it sets the scene because you start, like we've said, very invigorated. And as the scent dries down into the heart, you get to see more of that balance. And I think what's great about this fragrance is it's such a journey. And we'll get some of those more back of the palate herbs coming through. We'll get the lactonic notes, and then it just mellows out and is just the perfect wearable herby scent.
Fantastic. So, as I mentioned when we did the perfume pyramid, there is some time that is required now for those opening notes to start to dissipate a little bit, to sort of die back, and for those heart notes to really start to pop forward. Gives us a little bit of time to have a chat so that we can get to know you, Sophie, a little bit better. So I guess the first question for us of what we'd love to know is really what inspired you to really get involved with perfume?
COVID. So COVID was the real catalyst for me. My background is in product development and brand management, and I was working across skincare and personal care. So fragrance was a big component, obviously, of both of those industries and the products I was developing. And I really fell in love with the business of fragrance. I was already a perfume lover, and in the back of my mind, since I was like leaving high school, I just had this vision of owning a perfume store. And I was like, oh, it would just be so fun, and I would deck it out. And I just had this vision, but it was never something that I thought was going to actually happen. It was one of those wild dreams. And then, so when my corporate career was taking off, I developed some really wonderful relationships with fragrance houses and my relevant account managers, and seeing the incredible innovation coming out within the fragrance industry, and seeing how sometimes that technology or science was almost being underutilized within the markets I was in, because fragrance is the last thing you put in a product. You think about what are the active ingredients and what's the packaging going to look like, and then the scent is a bit of an afterthought, but it's also one of the most powerful tools in the perception of the product. If it doesn't smell good, you don't want to put it on your face and you don't think it's going to work. But if it smells amazing, you don't care what's in it. You just want to slather it on. And so that concept really sat with me during lockdown. And I'm from WA originally. And so I was missing home. I was missing the life that I, loved in Melbourne. I was still living in Melbourne at the time. And I would reflect on the fragrances I had in my collection, and they would remind me of I'm going out to a bar with my girlfriends, or I'm going and having a picnic in the park. And then I was thinking about the Australian perfume landscape and how there was really no inspiration from Australian life and the life that we lead and the wonderful and creative things that we do. And why not? We live such a beautiful life here, and it's so different to what you get in Europe or in the US. And there's something so special about, long lunching in Paddington. Like, why not celebrate that? And so that was when I started working on the brand.
It's fantastic. I really love the story. And it's actually so nice to hear that something creative sprung out of the lockdowns.
Mm-hmm.
So how did you then make that leap, I guess, from having all those ideas and to, I guess, forming your business?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think what is a real asset to me is I'm actually trained as a graphic designer. So I started mocking things up and visualizing what the brand was going to look like, and just was slowly chipping away while I was working full time. And so I worked on the development of the brand over 2 years. So I just really took my time with it, and it was a fun passion project, and it really got me through lockdown, which was so nice. And then I was so ready to launch, and everything was lifting at the time. And so it was a very joyous occasion to end the treacherous lockdowns.
The longest, hardest, harshest lockdowns in the world in Melbourne, in case you weren't aware. Fantastic. So, Sophie, you've touched on that your fragrances are really story-driven. You take that sort of story-driven approach to scent, and it's very much Australian-based. So you're taking inspiration from, as you said, the long lunches in Paddington. You're taking inspiration from various different cities around the country. And then you reverse engineer those moments and those places, which is absolutely intriguing to me. How do you go about capturing the scent of a moment or a city or a place?
So I'm a very visual person, and I have synesthesia, so I can smell color. And so for me, it's a very visual process. I can visualize I'm sitting at the lunch table. There's the burrata on the table. There's a cute waiter who's giving me eyes, and I'm chatting to my friend about some gossip, and, life is good in that moment. And so I think about that, and I think about what I'm seeing around me, what's in front of me, and then I mood board that. And then from there, we develop the fragrance, and then I sample it with all of my friends and all of my peers. And then I get your advice. What does this smell like to you? And then once people start saying, oh, it smells like a dish of burrata, I feel like I'm at lunch, then I know that I've gotten it right, because it is something that you should be able to experience and understand immediately. Oh, yes, I totally know what that smells like. And I think the hardest part of marketing fragrances is explaining what it smells like. And so if you can say, well, this smells like lunch in Paddington, you already kind of have an idea of where this is going to go. So that's really how I create the fragrances.
Absolutely. Storytelling is so important when it comes to fragrance. It's been a pretty continual theme that we've seen, I guess, on our journey through fragrance. Now, just before we move on from this, because I think this is quite intriguing, the condition that you just mentioned there, synesthesia, is that right?
I never know if I pronounce it correctly, but yes, that's what I call it.
So you smell colour.
So you can smell colour. I thought everyone had it, because sometimes it's a bit generic, like an orange will smell like an orange, but it has different textures and different colours can come up, and it can be moving. And so I know I've got the fragrance right when it matches the colours I wanted in my head.
Isn't that intriguing?
Sounds like a special gift.
It's so much fun.
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about ingredients. So how do you select them? How do you source your ingredients? And if you were to define yourself by one specific ingredient, what might it be?
So I typically have an idea in my head of what ingredients I think will make up the fragrance.
Mhm.
So when I work with my team, they are the perfumers. So they know better than me, and I fully respect that. So if I say, I think we need XYZ in this fragrance, they'll say, yes, that's a terrible idea. And I love that collaborative nature of what I do, because again, we're reverse engineering a scent memory, and the perfumer also has a scent memory. And so I think it's really fun to get a different interpretation as a part of the development process. But I work with fragrance houses, so I don't go ahead and source the ingredients myself. But as a part of the evaluation process, I'm very much in control of the final outcome and tweaking different parts of it and removing or adding of different notes within the fragrance.
Awesome.
Fantastic. So as part of that process, and we did a bit of research on your brand before you came on the show, and we've experienced your fragrances before. You've noted that you use a combination of natural ingredients and safe synthetics, which really means that you're talking about a clean formulation. So I guess a two-part question for you. What is a clean formulation, and why should consumers be concerned with a clean formulation?
Okay, I love this question for many reasons. I think what is very sad about the fragrance industry is the fear-mongering about synthetic molecules and aroma molecules, because it is regulated by IFRA, and so all of our fragrances are IFRA compliant. It is not a legal regulation, but it is the only type of regulatory body in fragrance. And I think people are taught to avoid synthetics because that word in itself is quite scary, but it's really not. So to be honest with you, I call them safe synthetics because of that fear that people have. But there are so many regulations now that it's really hard to find synthetic fragrances that are truly bad for you. Definitely a little while ago when it was less regulated, it was very different. But natural fragrances have their own issues. You know, it's so exhausting on the environment, and the pure amount of product you need for a small amount of oil is crazy. There's so much waste. So I think when I talk about natural versus synthetic, I try to speak about it in a way that is digestible for the average consumer who does still hold these kinds of reservations about what is safe and what isn't. But I am very diligent about that, and all of our fragrances are IFRA compliant, so therefore they are considered safe formulations.
Fantastic. It's definitely worth noting that, of course, there are dangerous naturals as well that are also regulated by IFRA and used in very controlled quantities. We did cover that off with a previous guest as well. Just because something is labelled natural doesn't necessarily mean that it's safe. Just something is labelled synthetic doesn't necessarily mean that it is dangerous. What is very, very important here is that you are purchasing fragrances from perfume houses that are compliant with IFRA. If you are not, you are taking a risk. You are putting this substance on your skin and you don't know what's going to happen. So please make sure that you're buying from reputable sources, just like Ficifolia.
Preach it.
Fantastic. So, Sophie, we're about 20 minutes in since we actually applied the fragrance, and it's probably a good time for us to start to transition through to those heart notes. But as I mentioned before, we're an education-based podcast, so we're going to revisit our perfume pyramid. So again, the construction of a perfume traditionally is in that pyramid. We've already covered off those opening notes, which are those lighter aroma molecules that dissipate rather quickly, and then we move into the heart. So the heart sits right in the center of that pyramid, and there's a good reason why we call the heart or heart notes. And it's really the beating heart of the fragrance. It's almost like the DNA of the fragrance. It's where our perfumer really starts to communicate what this fragrance is all about. It's really a sort of tantalizing introduction to those base notes, that sort of rising action in the story as we build towards the climax of the base note. So with that description in place, and hopefully I've done heart notes some justice there, but what are we actually experiencing in our heart notes?
So now we're experiencing more of the white florals and your drier herbs, so your thyme and your rosemary. And also my favorite part, the burrata. So we're really getting into the heart of it, and you'll find now it's not as invigorating. Juicy herbs at the start have calmed, and now we're getting those drier, deeper notes coming through from the thyme and the rosemary. But also it's cut back now with those beautiful white florals and the burrata. So
Going to have to ask you to explain burrata.
yes.
What is it? And tell us about this unusual note.
So burrata is a cheese. It's a mozzarella filled with stracciatella, my favorite in the world. And it really, in this fragrance, it provides a really great lactonic base. And in my opinion, this is what makes the fragrance really wearable. Those white florals and the lactonic note of the burrata really mellows the fragrance out, because otherwise it would just be far too herbaceous. And this is, I think, what separates it from candle territory.
Okay.
And I think it's one of those beautiful kind of back of the palate notes that just adds a level of complexity to the fragrance that can really be enjoyed by the wearer.
Fantastic. Definitely can sense this now with that description. So you also mentioned the white florals. It sort of does feel to me like walking into a flower shop and really getting that boom of white florals. So that bunch of white flowers, I'm absolutely getting that. It does feel like a combination.
Which is interesting that you bring up, because white florals are typically listed as top notes. And I think in this particular fragrance, those notes are really masked by that mint and that eucalyptus, which is why they're listed as heart notes, because you really don't quite get to them until this point of the fragrance. But you're right. It is, I think with white florals, they do have a bit of a green element to them. White florals often to me smell like freshly cut flowers. And yeah, they really provide a beautiful base for this fragrance.
Really starting to feel like we've got a beautiful bunch of flowers sitting on a table inside of the bistro as we're eating our burrata. The picture is really starting to form there.
Absolutely. Just to round out the heart notes, how would you say that they come together to bring that personality together for Bistro Boy?
Well, I think now you're seeing the complexity of the fragrance. And so the name Bistro Boy actually comes from the code name that girls give their crushes in a group chat. So Bistro Boy is the waiter at the restaurant that you develop a little crush on. And so for me, the heart notes are like, this is the second time you've been to the restaurant and you're maybe flirting a little differently this time. And so you're seeing a different side of Bistro Boy that you didn't see the first time. And that's how I see it.
I love it. I love the story that is unfolding here.
Yeah.
It really is important to get that sort of picture, because we're unfolding through a range of different notes as we move through that pyramid. We're on a journey, but what does that journey actually mean? And you're giving us a really great description here of how that's unfolding. Fantastic. So, as I mentioned before, there is that dry down period, and the dry down between the opening and the heart is a little bit shorter than between the heart and the base. Now, this gives us a good sort of chunk of time to maybe expand and have a look at the broader Ficifolia range. Now, I believe you've brought in your sample packs, and they're quite unique. So before we get stuck into the fragrances themselves, you've got two different sample packs. One is called the Melbourne Flight Deck and the other is the Sydney Flight Deck. Why are they called flight decks?
Well, I am a marketer at heart. So I love alliteration. If there's one thing about me, and you'll see that a lot in the brand, everything is F. And I feel like every brand has a discovery set or a sample pack. So I was really thinking, well, how can I make this different? And we obviously have a significant pillar within the brand of travel and visiting somewhere or enjoying the place that you are. So for me, flight deck was really great. But you can get a flight of gins to sample, or you can be on the flight deck on a plane. So it just was a fun way to spice up a discovery set. And I think it's really cool because people come up to me and, oh, I got the flight deck. I got the flight deck. And it's so nice because it doesn't have the same ring as, oh, I got the discovery. You know what I mean? It's wordy. So the Ficifolia flight deck really rolls off the tongue.
I think we did exactly that when we met Sophie at the Geelong Fragrance Fair. Hey, we've got your flight deck.
Yeah.
And we really like the concept.
Thank you.
Well, let's explore. I believe the Bistro Boy is part of the Sydney flight deck, and we've heard about the Paddington lunch. So where should we go next in the flight deck?
I think we should start in Melbourne.
Okay.
I think it makes sense. So we can talk about Out of Office, which is our longest standing bestseller. And it is inspired by after-work drinks on the Yarra. So it's very reminiscent of 4 p.m. on a Friday, a clear calendar, an Aperol spritz in hand, and really just the signs of a good weekend.
Nice.
Awesome. All right, so we're going to spray our samples out on some test strips now and have a little bit of a smell. And we're going to be guided through just, I guess, a top-level view of the notes. Just while you're doing that there, Sophie, can I just ask you, when is this fragrance sort of suitable? Is this one of those I guess fragrances that works across multiple seasons, or is there a particular season
Out of office?
Yeah, out of office.
Look, it's definitely more of a summertime vibe, but I do love layering it with one of our other fragrances, Intermission, which is a lot more woody, spicy, and green. They work really beautifully and harmoniously together. So, yeah, definitely more summertime, daytime energy. But, use what's in your fragrance wardrobe and prolong the life of your summer fragrances so that they're all year round.
All right, fantastic. And in terms of, I guess, situation, so you mentioned it's a bit of a daytime sort of fragrance. Is this a daytime office fragrance or a daytime party on the weekend fragrance?
Well, it's so funny because so many of my friends are like, oh, I keep Out of Office in my office, and it's so funny. But it is, I think it's one of those fragrances that's incredibly palatable. Everyone loves it, and no one pulls up a funny face or anything. And so I think that you can have some fragrances that are definitely like no-goes to the office because they're just far too offensive. But yes, this one is suitable for any daytime. And again, it has that energizing and uplifting feel like Bistro Boy does. And so it will just always put you in a good mood and always catch a compliment, which is so fun too.
I feel, I feel like it's almost a fizziness, even though that's not a smell. It's what it's bringing, I guess, maybe a set memory to me.
Yeah. No, 100%. And I think, so this has Italian mandarin, jasmine, lemon, patchouli, burnt sugar, musk. And it is kind of dizzying, which I think is really beautiful. And for a citrus white floral fragrance, it really has a lot of depth to it, which I think is hard to find. And it does. It has that kind of bubbly essence to it, which I think is quite reminiscent of an after-work cocktail.
Absolutely. That sort of fresh, boozy. Yeah, I think you've captured it there that, 4 o'clock on a Friday out of office, enjoying a cocktail and sort of letting your hair down, but also something that you could wear into the office because it's nice and fresh. I think everybody around you would enjoy this. This is nothing that's overwhelming or cloying at all. So absolutely beautiful.
Yeah.
Fantastic. All right. So which should we explore next?
Well, I was hearing that you're a fan of Rose. So let's do Rose Street.
Love Rose. So we were talking just before the show. We're talking about some of our favourite notes in perfumery. Really hard question to answer, just to nail it down to one, especially when you're a fan of fragrances. But for me personally, I absolutely love rose in summer. I think it works really, really well off my skin. And so I'm really excited to smell this one.
I love this one. I think people ask me, well, what's your favorite fragrance? Which I think is like asking what your favorite child is. But
This is absolutely gorgeous. The rose pops immediately. It is quite a unique rose, though.
Yes.
I've smelt many, many different roses here. So give me a bit of an understanding here of what I'm smelling in terms of the opening notes here.
Yeah. So this fragrance is inspired by vintage shopping in Fitzroy. So the brief was your grandma's perfume, but cooler. And I think we really did an excellent job with that. So the opening notes are raspberry, rhubarb, and rose. So it's really quite a jammy rose.
Which all the time.
Yeah, I totally love. And I think that's what makes this so special of a rose fragrance is it's not predictable. And I think I often call this the rose converter because people come to me and oh, I don't like rose, but you'll like this one.
How can you not like rose? It's beautiful. But this, yeah, very, very jammy. Those three notes really combine to create, it's sweet, but not like overwhelmingly sweet. It's beautiful. It's a beautiful update.
Well, and touching back to my detest for gourmands and vanilla, this actually does have a note in vanilla. And I love a note in vanilla when it's not the hero. And so the vanilla and the oud in this fragrance really add complexity and in a new and fresh way that hasn't been done with a rose. And it's just, it melts on the skin. Like it's such a good skin scent.
Yeah, you're touching on my two favourite notes in perfumery. We also touched on oud. Oud is definitely one of those fragrances that I love. A bit more of a winter one for me. But the way this combines, this really feels like one of those fragrances that you could absolutely wear all year round without a problem. So I guess how would you sort of classify it?
I call this one a day to night fragrance because you start off with that fruity fun side and then it's date night and it becomes kind of sexy and beautiful. So you can wear that anytime and it's always appropriate.
That's fantastic. I love this.
Yes, it's really lovely.
Good. Shall we continue on with the last of Melbourne?
I think so.
Okay,
Let's
fabulous.
do it.
This is called Intermission, which is inspired by Melbourne's live music and theatre scene.
Okay. This is an interesting one to capture, the live music scene. So I guess tell us a little bit about, what's inspiring the notes that we're just about to smell.
Well, I let it be known I used to be a real theatre kid. So when I moved to Melbourne, I loved going to any type of show, whether it was music or theatre or ballet. I just had to be there. So it holds a special place in my heart. And I think what I love about the Melbourne entertainment scene is it has such a rich culture, and you can see that in the venues, whether it's, the Night Cat, which is just trashed, but it's so fun and it's beautiful and it has positive energy and so much creativity. Or you could go somewhere like the Princess Theatre, which is so gorgeous, and just you walk in and it just gives you that feel of enormity and excitement. And then I love, love, love the exterior of the Forum in the city. And to me, that's just, it's gothic and it just every facet about it is just so enveloping. And so Intermission for me was a no-brainer for the Melbourne collection. And so it has cardamom, cedarwood, sandalwood, vetiver, fir needle. So it captures the essence of the excitement of a night out at the theatre or going to a gig without like the sweatiness, but it's still fresh and still has that old comforting kind of feel. And it's very gender neutral too. So yeah.
Yeah, I'd agree that would work for both of us for sure.
It's beautiful. I like this very much. And, you just reminded me how fortunate we are to have so many amazing theatres and as you say, culture here in Melbourne that we can enjoy.
Absolutely. We're both, again, we could say that we're fans of every note, let's be honest. But we love vetiver. Vetiver is one of those fragrances
Me
that we can buy and we can both wear, no problems. So, I mean, we've got a fairly substantial collection, possibly bordering on problematic, but we like to be able to share as many fragrances as we can, particularly unisex fragrances.
Cool.
Absolutely, it really works for us, and it's just one that works on both of our skin, no problem at all.
Yeah.
Lovely fragrance.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, so I guess we're probably ready to move on to the Sydney flight deck,
Yes,
of which Bistro Boy is a part of that particular flight deck. So which one are we going to be looking at first?
We'll start with Sunbathers. Sunbathers was a no-brainer for Sydney. I think by the name you can already tell what it smells like. But I really wanted... I think when I think of summer and when I think of Sydney, obviously you think of the beach. And my least favorite part of going to the beach is the lathering of sunscreen. And it's because my dad traumatized me as a kid and he would lather us and like thick. There's a photo of me in tears because we were going to the beach and I'm just white with sunscreen. So I wanted to change that memory, but it's something I think of every time I go to the beach.
Fantastic. We're thinking Bondi Beach. We're thinking summertime. We're thinking sunscreen. Now, I am assuming here that we have got a note that sort of speaks to maybe that sunscreen.
Yes. So this is a very fun fragrance. It has coconut water, frozen lemon, cyclamen, green leaves, ginger. There's a sunscreen accord in there, cedarwood and musk.
Yeah. So first impression is definitely that tropical, sun baking.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, very nice.
Yeah.
Holidays.
Yeah, and I think what I love about this fragrance is I think coconut can often wander into body spray territory, which is not what I want. And so we elected to use a note of coconut water. So it's a little bit lighter. There's also a sea salt note in there, which I feel like you can really, really get. So it's not like overly creamy, which I think is often a complaint I have with coconut fragrances. But it's just, this is the most easy wearing fragrance ever. And it's also when it's hot, you don't want to wear perfume, which is tragic. But you want to wear this one because it just is so easy wearing on a hot summer's day.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's definitely it's a sophisticated fragrance while being super fun,
Correct.
super fresh. It's absolutely fantastic. So you touched on a note there, which was the sunscreen accord.
Correct.
So we've got a great opportunity to educate our audience here. What's the difference between a note and an accord?
So this is the beauty of fragrance and how subjective it is, because there is no such thing as a sunscreen note. It just simply does not exist. And this is where our synthetics come in handy. And so a sunscreen accord is a variety of notes when added together create one. So it's like a perfume within a perfume if you really want to get deep. So yes, it's a sunscreen accord. So it's just a bunch of fragrance, but it's a bunch of molecules when strung together smell like sunscreen.
Yeah, there's a lot of a connection with music when we talk about fragrance as well. So we have a single note that we can play, or we can press a chord, which is a combination of different notes. So there's often a connection with music there, as in terms of how we sort of imagine a note versus an accord.
Yeah, and further to that, by blending synthetic and natural materials, you create something new entirely that you couldn't create without the other. So I think of it often, I'm a big Tame Impala fan, so I reference it to the combination of acoustic instruments and synthesized music. And it just creates something that is just insane. And you couldn't do it without the other. And so they work really well together, and it allows for greater creativity.
Fantastic. That is beautiful. So we've smelt quite a lot of fragrances so far. I'm just trying to keep track here. Have we gone through? We have got one more to go. Fantastic. It is getting very fragrant in here, and it is absolutely beautiful.
This one's the heaviest of them all, so it's a great place to end.
Fantastic. So what is this one called?
This one is Oh Darling. And it is an ode to New Year's Eve fireworks at Darling Harbour. And my dog's name is Darling as well, which is just a little fun tidbit.
Oh, it's cute. So this one's sounding like it may have maybe a little bit romantic, potentially.
So the name Oh Darling obviously comes from the Darling Harbour, but also the exclamation of that New Year's Eve kiss as well. So this one has sold out since we launched. It's back online now, which is great, but the people love her. And I love her, and I'm really proud of this fragrance because going back to the synesthesia, for me, it was like I really visualized that purpley, cloudy sky after the fireworks. And so there's a lot of like more purpley, darky pink florals in this. And that's really where that colored sky comes through. But what's beautiful about this fragrance is I designed the notes to erupt like a firework. So the opening notes are the honey and the clementine. So you really start off quite bright, and then you get more of the rose and the peony, and then you fall into the smoke and the amber and the myrrh, and that's the fireworks fading away.
Wow.
Yeah, so I'm very proud of this one.
Yeah, absolutely should be. This is gorgeous.
Thank you.
Anyone who wears this is absolutely irresistible. I think you just want to grab them and give them a kiss. So,
Darling.
It's beautiful.
Thank you.
absolutely lovely. And this is really just a great example of how you really capture a story and a place all at the same time. And the way that this fragrance is unfolding, and obviously we can only really experience the opening notes now. We can't go all the way through the perfume pyramid here, but it is really giving me a sense that we're there. We're in Sydney. We're at the harbour. I could smell everything.
Yeah, and speaking again about, at what point would you wear this fragrance? I wouldn't recommend during the day, but if you love it, you love it. But for me, it is the perfect summer nighttime fragrance that is like an ode to your winter fragrances, because it has a lot of depth and heaviness to it, but it still has that kind of, sickly summer night vibe to it. And it's just beautiful on a hot summer's night, and it just oozes off you. And I think the heat really amplifies the excitement of those top notes, which makes it even more special.
Absolutely. If you wear this to work, you're going to get some attention.
Oh, don't wear it on a plane. Whatever you do, you'll get some complaints.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, fantastic. Just before we sort of round all of this out, probably important to note that your perfume, so all of them are, I guess, listed as extrait de parfum, which is, I think, around 25%.
Correct. Yes. So an EDP, which is what you'll find typically in eau de parfum, is typically between 15 and 20%, and then an extrait is anything above 20. I made that choice for a couple of reasons. I think specifically in the Australian landscape, the mass market landscape, people complain my fragrance doesn't last long enough. And one of the solutions to that is having a higher concentrated fragrance. And I think a caveat to that is also your fragrance isn't lasting long for a lot of reasons, and it's not necessarily reflective of the quality of the fragrance. It could be due to its largely molecular makeup, could be quite small in molecular size. That's why you'll find woody and heavier fragrances, which are typically larger in molecular size, will last longer. But I chose to do extrait because I think that from the perspective of a consumer, this fragrance is going to last you longer because you need a little bit less. And so especially those who are heavy-handed with the spritz, you can still go crazy and it'll last you all day, or you can just spray a little bit and it'll last all day, but just for you.
Fantastic. I guess, it is, when we talk about the concentration of aromatics, while it sounds like it is strong, it's not necessarily about it being strong. It's about the composition of that
Exactly.
fragrance, but it does help us with longevity, with sillage, as you mentioned, with projection, where the combination is appropriate. So really good to understand as well what you're actually paying for when you buy a fragrance. So a lot of fragrances that we buy from a lot of the big brands, the concentration is nowhere near this type of level, and you're paying quite the premium for it. So really good to get an understanding that you're getting really good value from these fragrances as well. So definitely worth explaining to our audience. All right, so we've explored our Sydney flight deck, we've explored our Melbourne flight deck, we've gone through the range here, and I think we're at I'm going to say about 50 minutes in. So while we might not have the full expression of the base notes, those notes are certainly going to be creeping through by now, and we'll be able to have a little bit of a chat about it. Just before we dive into those base notes, again, let's return to our perfume pyramid. So we're now at the very base of the pyramid. We've done our opening notes at the very top, our heart notes right in the middle, and we're down the bottom of the pyramid. And it being a pyramid structure, the largest section is the base. And there's a good reason for that, and a good reason for the imagery around the perfume pyramid. And that's because it's actually the base notes that linger for the longest. So when we use a fragrance, we've got our opening notes that will dissipate anywhere between sort of 15 to 30 minutes. Our heart notes will hang around for a bit longer, but it's those base notes that will last all day long. Again, depending on a number of different factors, including the concentration of the perfume, depending on the chemistry of your skin, which can be a little bit of a factor as well, depending on the temperature, the heat, how quickly the fragrance activates. But essentially the base notes is what lasts to the climax of the perfume and what hangs around for the longest. So hopefully, again, I've done a bit of a decent description of base notes here. So let's return to our fragrance, have a little bit of a sniff, and then Sophie, if you can talk us through what we're experiencing here, that would be great.
Of course. Well, look, there's a lot going on in this fragrance overall. So our base notes here are cedarwood and musk. And you'll find that pretty much all of our fragrances have a base of cedarwood and musk. And I think it's just the perfect way to end a fragrance. Cedarwood is, for me, I would describe as a really great neutral wood. Kind of just goes with everything. Same as musk. And, as the day goes on, it just melts beautifully and really leaves you with a nice taste in your mouth.
So for people who are, again, a little bit new to perfumery, musk, this can smell a little bit different depending on whether you're dealing with a natural or whether you're dealing with a synthetic, depending on what particular facets of the musk that you're pushing forward or pushing away. What are we actually smelling here in the base when it comes to the musk? What's really sort of popping out here?
Yeah, it's that kind of cloudy, kind of monotonous smell that you get in the back of the palette for me. And it's really just, it's interesting bringing out the natural and synthetic, because if you have natural musk in your fragrance, it is not vegan. And which is, it's crazy that I don't even want to talk about how they found that. But yeah, it's that kind of cloudiness to it that just adds a little bit of oomph and a hint of sweetness.
Yeah, good one to point out, and we won't deep dive into this too much, but there are some pretty wacky ingredients that can go into perfume. Musk being one of natural musk being one of them. Another one being civet, ambergris. So there's a few items that come from animals, and so this is why we're making a point of saying that these ingredients are vegan. Means that it hasn't come from an animal, and no animals have been harmed in the production of it, which is also important.
Correct. Yes.
How would you say that the base notes evolve over the day? So you mentioned that they melt away. Can you explain a little bit more how they?
Yeah. Like I said, this is a very top-heavy fragrance, and we have a lot of impactful and long-lasting top and heart notes, because you're still, and we also haven't let it fully dry down, but it's the end of the meal. It's the palate cleanser, and it is a really great finish to what was a very exciting and very invigorating fragrance. It's calmer. Yeah, it is. It's the end to the fragrance without abruptly stopping
Mm.
in terms of the experience.
Yeah, that makes sense to me.
Absolutely. It is very, very wearable, very pleasant, just something that you're going to catch whiffs off yourself all day, which sometimes you can go a little bit nose blind to your own fragrances, but certainly not with this. I have noticed that I'm probably getting those notes coming through in the base a little bit stronger on my skin than on the blotter. I'm not sure the blotter's quite there yet, and I don't think it will be for a while. I think we're still really at the very beginning of the heart on the blotter.
It's a long-lasting fragrance.
Absolutely.
How different it smells.
Yeah, absolutely. We're just going to swap smells just here for a moment, because what we often find is how it expresses itself on me versus Robin can be quite different, and I think it absolutely is.
The florals are coming out for me now.
Yeah, a little bit more on you for sure. So you mentioned that your fragrance is quite long lasting. When it comes to Bistro Boy, and I know there's a lot of variables here, but how long could we typically expect this fragrance to last?
Well and truly over 8 hours.
Wow.
Yeah, no, I'm not sure if this is a great story for the podcast, but I was coming home from wines with the girls, and this was when I was still in the sampling process of this fragrance, and I was pulling my keys out, and in that movement, the vial dropped out of my bag and it smashed on the ground. So I was picking up all the little pieces. I showered, I went to bed. And then in the morning, I could still smell it after I had showered, washed my hands on my fingers the next morning. So,
okay, so it is quite long lasting.
It's very long lasting.
Absolutely. Now, obviously, there are multiple different factors involved in how long a fragrance lasts, but with the strength of the aromatics that are present in this fragrance, expecting plus 8 hours is absolutely fantastic. So it's going to last you all the way through the day or all the way through the night if you want. So that's wonderful.
Yeah. Be warned of partners stealing this one. I have gone through many a bottles of this one because they keep disappearing.
I can imagine.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think we can really close out the base notes there. Overall, how would you say that these base notes align with your overall brand philosophy and the way that Ficifolia fragrances aim to evoke memories and experiences?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I feel like cedarwood and musk is a favorite combo of mine. So I think from a collection perspective, it really rounds out.
Yeah, and thank you for taking us on such a detailed guided tour through Bistro Boy. I think we don't often get the opportunity to experience a fragrance in quite that depth, and it just helps us to connect with the fragrance a little bit more, understand the story and understand the notes. So thanks for taking us through that masterclass. Now, before we let you go, Sophie, there's a couple of other important things that we're wanting to sort of cover off today, and that is Ficifolia's involvement with charity. So I believe that you've got some involvement with the Star Foundation. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Stars Foundation is a wonderful, wonderful operation. So they are designed to empower young First Nations women through the end of high school and then into full-time work or further study. They work nationally, and I am very honoured and very privileged to contribute $5 from every 100ml bottle purchased towards their initiatives.
Fantastic. So every time one of us buys one of your fragrances, we're contributing to the Star Foundation as well.
Correct.
Isn't that lovely?
Yeah, well done. That's amazing, and you should be very proud. That's awesome.
Thank you.
So, Sophie, it's been amazing chatting with you. Where can our listeners find your fragrances and, experience Bistro Boy and the flight decks for themselves?
Yeah, of course. So you can shop online at ficifolia.com. Our flight decks they're a redeemable offering. So they are $50 and then you get a $50 credit to put towards your favorite full-size fragrance. Your favorite 100ml fragrance. And then you can also shop us at Law Perfumery in Fitzroy if you're a Melbourne local.
Fantastic. And Law is an absolutely wonderful store. If you get a chance to pop in there, whether you're from Melbourne or you're flying in from another state, do yourself a favour and pop into Law. It's a wonderful spot to go to. So for those people who are actually viewing the show on YouTube, we're actually going to have the Ficifolia website on your screen right now. If you are listening on a podcast, whether that be on Spotify or via Apple Podcasts, we'll ensure that we embed the website into the description itself. What you'll also have flashing on your screen right now is a link to the Olfactive website, so olfactive.com.au. It's a QR code, so feel free to scan that code. It'll take you directly to our website. On the website, we will have a link to this episode. We'll have some show notes, and we'll also have the website and links to all of the Ficifolia socials as well. So you'll be able to find that nice and easily.
Before we let you go, we have to know what's next for Ficifolia, and is there anything exciting you can share with us today?
Yes. I mean, we always have something exciting in store, but we are currently working on a range of singular notes. So they're fragrances that are designed to layer. So I'm picking some of my favorite fragrance notes and putting them in roll-on form so that it's a great entryway to discovering how to layer fragrances together without feeling overwhelmed. So stay tuned for that launching soon.
Very exciting. We can't wait to get our nose on that.
Yeah.
I also have a sample of an upcoming fragrance in my bag. I don't know if we want to smell it because I can't talk about the notes, but if you want to blind react to it, I don't know.
I would love to blind react to this. How exciting. Fantastic. All right. So let's get it out.
I'd love to get your feedback as well.
Fantastic. Let's have a smell. We're here. Why not do it now?
Let's do it.
Okay, perfect.
All right. So for those who are listening, Sophie is just grabbing out this fragrance and popping it onto a blotter so that we can have a bit of a blind reaction here. Now, we can't go through the note, but we're just going to give you our impressions of what we like. So Robin's just grabbing those now. Thank you very much.
I think you'll like it.
Let's have a smell.
Mm.
Oh, wow. This is lovely.
Yeah.
This to me is quite a sophisticated
Yes.
scent. This could be a date night. This could be a business meeting. This definitely feels a bit elevated in terms of its of its sophistication.
Yeah.
So
It's sexy.
yeah, it is sexy.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to call out any particular notes here that I'm smelling because we don't want to give anything away at this stage. But this is lovely. You should be very excited about this. Can I be cheeky and ask when we can expect this to potentially roll out?
I can't answer that. I'm sorry.
All right. Well, we tried.
Hopefully sooner than later, but we'll see.
Fantastic. All right, viewers, we did try, but our strong recommendation here is to jump onto the website. Do you have a newsletter that people can subscribe to?
Yes, we do. It should pop up as soon as you land on the website, but if not, scroll to the bottom.
Fantastic. So jump onto the website, subscribe, and then you can be the first to know when this particular fragrance is released. So fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing that with us, and I'm going to keep that aside so that I can smell it a little bit more.
We'll talk about it later.
Fantastic. So I just really want to thank you, Sophie, for being so generous with your time today. Not only have you taken us all the way through Bistro Boy, you've shared all of the fragrances across the Ficifolia range, but you've also helped educate us on specific notes and specific accords to better educate us on how to identify notes in perfumery in general. You've also explained to us the difference between a synthetic note and a natural note, and the important distinction with synthetics not necessarily being dangerous the way they're sort of made out to be, but there are safe synthetics and sort of dangerous naturals, and we shouldn't shy away from these because it's all part of the creative process, and we should feel safe to wear those. Obviously, if you're compliant with IFRA. So thank you so much for being generous with your time.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for having me. It's been nothing but wonderful.
Yeah, I'd just like to also say thank you. I've really enjoyed everything that Trent said, but also just running through the experiences, because I think that's something very unique to your brand, and I've felt very much emerged in the stories, and I know that I'm going to take that away with me. Whenever I smell them, I'm going to be able to make the connection, which is obviously what it's all about. So thank you. I really appreciate the time that you've spent with us today. And I hope that our listeners have too. I'm sure they have. Please like and subscribe so that we can do this again and explore some more extraordinary fragrances and the stories behind them.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.